Marvel. The beginning becomes Superman's old enemy. Chapter 46. O2 saw the woman wearing a half-face mask with a chicken's crown on her head, with colored energy flowing through her body to clean up the interstellar pirates on the planet. O2, although he doesn't know who she is, the pirate leader of the battleship next to him knows. The pirate leader shouted loudly to the people next to him, "First mate. Hurry up and let them pack up and retreat immediately. Captain Marvel, that crazy woman is here." After hearing the name of the woman below who was killing in all directions, O2 immediately asked the artificial intelligence on the spaceship to search for her information on the interstellar network. The artificial intelligence on the Krypton solo exploration spacecraft replied, "Lord O2, the woman below is nicknamed Captain Marvel, who seems to have served in the Kree Empire's pursuit team against the Skrulls, and later found his original identity in Midgar, repelled the Accuser fleet of the Accuser Ronin, and has been protecting various indigenous planets in the universe ever since." Quote. O2, I don't understand a little, but I have a little ability not to keep my own planet, why run to the universe to manage other people's affairs? Is it in order to be a hero in the universe and become the same people as the Lantern Legion? When O2 was thinking, Captain Marvel Carol Danvers had cleaned up the pirates on the planet, and she flew to outer space with an iron head that crashed through the flagship of this interstellar pirate, and the remaining pirate ships saw that the flagship was destroyed, and instantly activated the space jump device to escape here. Carol looked around and saw that there was also a spaceship parked here and fired an energy wave over. O2 looked at the energy waves hitting his spaceship and frowned. The artificial on the spaceship could only immediately say, "Master O2, I suggest that you capture this woman alive. The energy on her body is somewhat similar to the Asgard Rainbow Bridge, and it should also come from the space gem." Hearing the analysis of the spacecraft's artificial intelligence, O2 opened the hatch and flew out, and things related to the original stone of the universe cannot be sloppy. Carol saw the strange spaceship, received a blow of his own and nothing happened, and a figure wearing armor flew out of it, which seemed to be a Kryptonian. Carol looked at O2 and pointed to the planet below to speak. After all, she did not have the ability to speak in the universe. O2 turned on the biological force field and wrapped her in and spoke, "You can speak now." Carol tentatively made a few sounds, and after finding that he could really speak, he said arrogantly, "That Kryptonian, you should be the leader of this group of interstellar pirates. Now tell me where your other accomplices are." She's seen footage of the Kryptonians taking Sovlan, so she thinks she has no problem hitting 2 or 5 Kryptonians. Looking at Carol's disgusting mouth, O2 said, "First of all, I am not the leader of this group of interstellar pirates, let alone any accomplices. Also, this face of yours makes me can't help but tear you to pieces directly." O2 then said, "Now, let me ask you to answer. Why do you have the breath of spatial rough stones on your body?" Seeing that this Kryptonian was so arrogant, Carol decided to teach him a good lesson and let him know not to have an arrogant attitude towards people who are stronger than himself in the future. Carol instantly turned on the double star state, and his hands came together and a large energy wave hit him. O2 looked at the slow-shooting shockwave in his eyes, and casually raised his hand to hit a shockwave formed by converting cosmic energy, directly dispersing Carol's attack. Captain Marvel Carol saw that his energy attack had not worked, and accelerated on the spot towards O2 and performed an Iron Head skill. O2's face was a little wrong. He thought that this idiot woman had been hitting things with her head and knocking her head stupidly. Such an obvious strength gap between the two could not be seen. O2 looked at Carol's rushing Iron Head and punched her in the head from above. At this moment, Carol was stunned. She could obviously feel her body falling towards the planet below, but she did not control her body, and she also felt that her skull was cracked. O2 saw that Carol had smashed into the surface of the planet before flying. O2 flew into the pit and pulled the lying Carol right with his toes. If he didn't pull it with his hands, O2 was afraid of being infected by her stupidity. O2 stepped on Carol's chest with one foot and said, "Now, tell me why you have the energy reaction of the space rough stone." Carol groaned, "You pirate. Hugh wants to know the whereabouts of the space rough from me." O2 seeing this stupid woman so hard, he removed the foot that was stepping on her chest. Carol took a breath and called out loudly, "Ah, quickly remove your feet." 1. of her arms was directly trampled by O2, and O2 saw that this stupid woman was still so tough that she smashed her foot by the way. Another foot on Carol's chest, stepped on a few ribs, and said, "If you don't want to die, answer my question, where did you contact the spatial rough stone and how did you absorb its power?" I said, don't step on it again, I'll tell you it all. O2 will move away from her chest, Carol said with difficulty. I obtained the gem energy from the explosion of the flying machine. The fuel of that flying machine was refined by the Cree people using the space rough stone. And when I left the Earth, the space rough stone was eaten by the Yuan Eater, and now the Yuan Eater is on the Earth. After learning the news he wanted, O2 threw Carol and flew back to his spaceship. Record these events in intelligence and continue to fly towards the Earth, and the spacecraft came to the sky above the Earth after 10 consecutive space jumps. O2 looking at the beautiful blue planet below, a desire for conquest appeared in his heart. He first used the spacecraft's artificial intelligence in outer space to understand the composition and general environment of a wave of civilizations on Earth, and then landed in a remote location in the beautiful country along the location provided by Carol. A car drove up less than a moment after he landed, and he was not surprised by these O2s, because he had never hidden his spacecraft after coming to the solar system. Out of the car came a black man with short hair and an eye patch, and a white man with a low hairline. The one-eyed black man walked up to O2 and said, "This alien friend, we are from the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. Earth hasn't started tourism yet, so you'll need to go back with us." Quote. The one-eyed black man who came to this one-eyed black man was the young Nick Fury. O2 said, "You are the administrator of the Earth responsible for registering outsiders." The one-eyed black man said, "You're right to say that. I'm Nick Fury, you can call me Fury, he's my partner Coulson." Coulson waved his hand and said, "Hello, what do you call this alien friend?" O2. Coulson and Nick Fury looked at each other, thinking that he had only said a code name because he didn't believe them. O2 clicked a few times at the warframe and asked the artificial intelligence to manage the ship to collect gem signals. The spaceship flew away stealthily under the astonished gazes of Coulson and Nick Fury. "Do you still have companions who didn't come down in the spaceship?" Nick Fury said. "No, the artificial intelligence of the spacecraft drove the ship back on its own." O2 rode. O2 continued, "Now you lead the way, and register with you." Then several people returned together, the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. Rode O2 drives super hearing and supervision to get some of the information available on Earth. And he also found a special divine power induction under the Earth, although he did not have divine power, but because he fused the genes of the Asa god race, he could detect divine power. This divine power is very similar to the group of celestial gods under New Krypton, so there should also be a sleeping celestial god under this planet, but it seems that it will take a long time to wake up through perception. Nick Fury, who was sitting in the passenger seat in the car, said, "So, Mr. O2, which planet are you from?" O2 replied, "I am from the Federal Empire located in New Krypton, and I came to look for something this time because of the order of my god lore. Can you easily reveal what it is?" Coulson, who was driving, asked. No, it's rude for you to ask like this, after all, it's someone's task." Nick Fury directly skipped the topic after finding that O2 had no meaning to say. After everyone arrived, the staff at the door and the staff who came and went looked at O2, who was nearly 2 meters tall and wearing armor, with a strange expression. Nick Fury said, "Next, let Coulson take you to register. I still have some personal matters to deal with, and I may have to meet later." Quote. Then Nick Fury and a passing female agent looked at each other, quipped, and followed, "Hi beauty, are you new to that department?" "I'm an old-timer. Let me familiarize you with it," said the two, disappeared into Coulson's field of vision. O2 can still be seen. The woman gave O2 a strange feeling, as if it was very unreal. Through his clairvoyant eyes, he saw that the woman's body was denser than a human, and that several special organs seemed to be scrolls. Nick Fury and the woman walked up to a hidden other and said, "That alien said he was from the Federal Empire, do you know what the people of that country are like?" The disguised scroll woman said in surprise, "Federal Empire. Then he must be a Kryptonian." Nick Fury said curiously, "Isn't it just an alien?" You seem to be surprised. Besides, even if they want to invade the Earth, we still have Carol. The scroll woman shook her head. No, Fury. Kryptonians are a very strong race. Even Carol can only deal with 2 Kryptonians at most. Nick. Fury looked at her and said, are you kidding me? Carol, who can catch the ship's attack and scare off the Kree Empire's accusers? I'm not kidding, Fury. The Kryptonians in the universe now are synonymous with God. I'll show you their information. Saying that, the scroll woman took out a small light curtain out of nowhere, which played an introduction to the Kryptonians and images of their battle. Nick Fury broke out in a cold sweat after reading it, and he actually came back in the same car as such a dangerous person. If he had said a few words on the road, he would have died. Wrong. Nick Fury suddenly seemed to think of something, and said to the Skrulin woman, you said they are all Kryptonians. That is, there is a whole planet of Superman in the universe. The Skrulls woman said, they are indeed Kryptonians, but Fury is wrong about one thing, they are stronger than Superman. Nick Fury said, it's not Superman as you understand, I'm talking about a DC comic where Superman is Kryptonian. The abilities they show are exactly the same as in the comics. Saying that, he picked up the light curtain to find Superman's comics. At this time, O2 had already followed Coulson into Register, and their current boss, Alexander Pierce, personally ran over to check the situation. O2 is observing everything here with perspective eyes as he walks, and Pierce asks Coulson to busy himself entertaining the alien, and Coulson can only obey and leave. Pierce stepped forward and said, hello this alien friend, I'm Alexander Pierce as the general manager here. O2's eyes flashed a light and said, I am O2, and I have seen a lot of products here that do not belong to your level of science and technology. Pierce's eyes narrowed slightly and he said warily, it is easy to explain here to inquire about the secrets of the federal government at will. O2 said unconcernedly, your threat is unconvincing, because all the weapons of your planet cannot kill me, including your so-called nuclear bomb. Pierce thought for a while, but he still didn't dare to gamble, so the two continued to visit the future shield. After the transfer, O2 decided to leave here, and he did not see the existence of the infinite rough stone here. But he didn't find a small black dot on the bottom layer, and the box cosmic cube wrapped in a special substance containing lead metal was lying there quietly. O2 turned to Pierce and said, your planet's diplomacy will definitely be successful in the future, now it's time for me to go and continue to complete my mission. Pierce said, you can't leave for the time being, your information and identity issues haven't been dealt with for you yet, so wait a little longer. O2 said, I can handle this myself, but I still have a good impression of you. Saying that, he handed Pierce a triangular medal with the Kryptonian military logo, and said, this is a portable energy shield that can withstand your so-called missiles at most. Pierce took the medal and then floated up in his surprised gaze. O2 nodded at him, directly smashed more than a dozen floors and ceilings on his head and flew out. The alarm sounded loudly in the whole bureau. Pierce looked at the big hole in front of him a little, did not slow down. The person who had just walked and chatted with him directly smashed the building and flew away in the next second. O2 flew around the planet once, and then saw that there was a mountain that seemed very strange, and his clairvoyant eyes were a little unable to see through, so he flew directly towards there. Ji Yi, who was meditating at Karma Taj, opened his eyes, and with a wave of his hand, a picture appeared in front of him. An alien was rapidly approaching here. Ji Yi left here to meet this alien who suddenly appeared. Ji Yi, as soon as he went out, he found that an alien was rushing towards this at high speed. O2 seeing the place that he felt suspicious, a bald woman suddenly appeared, and she couldn't help but be a little jealous. He repeatedly observed the woman and thought to himself, was it just space movement technology or something else? This is a backward planet, but there are so many unusual places. But at this moment, O2 saw the necklace around the woman's neck, and his see-through eyes saw that inside was one of the direct tasks, the time gem. Ji Yi was the first to speak. Who are you, a cosmic person or a dimensional demon god? I've never seen you on the timeline. O2 replied, I am a warrior of the Fedel Empire, the guard of the supreme sun god Luoer. Who are you again? Why is there a cosmic rough stone? Furuchi wondered, I've never heard of the Fedel Empire, but if your target is the time gem, it won't be possible for you to go back alive. O2. Seeing that this bald woman had no intention of handing over the gemstone at all, Her eyes turned red and she directly hit it with a hot ray. Ji Yuyi saw that the other party directly launched an attack, and also planned to directly control the other party before asking. Ji Yuyi drew the ring of Lagdor with one hand to form a magic shield to block the heat ray, and flipped it with the other hand to instantly open the mirror space. O2 rushed over and used super speed to directly kill this bald woman, and Ji Yu launched the strongest defensive magic in Karma Taj with a wave of his hand, Hog's ancient lord bow. A space door appeared behind him, and he disappeared from O2's sight. O2 punched the Hog's ancient lord bow and stopped without warning, and the magic array in front of him disappeared into butterfly. The kinetic energy formed by his accelerated punch disappeared in an instant. O2 looked at the strange environment of the mirror space, punched the air, the sonic boom formed shook the mirror space out of a crack, but disappeared in an instant. Suddenly O2 raised his head, he felt a super strong sense of crisis. A magic array appeared on his head, and the body's instinct warned him to escape quickly, otherwise he would definitely die under this blow. Furuchi appeared above O2 through the space door, and she raised her hands to cast the Thunder of Bosart. This is a very strong attack magic of Karma Taj. The only drawback is that it is slow, but it is easy for others to speed it up. At the moment O2 looked up, the magic formed and hit down. Furuchi used the time gem to restrict the flow of time around O2, but O2 barely dodged with his fighting instincts. O2 gasped, and at that moment he really felt like he was going to die. O2 mobilized the cosmic energy in his body, hit Vegeta's Prince battle method with both hands, and his eyes also emitted heat rays in stages to attack the bald woman in front of him. However, Ji Yuyi is not a supreme mage who will only fight in close combat in the future. She used ranged attacks throughout the whole process after sensing O2's power, and O2's attacks were very strong but did not hit Ji Yuyi at all. Ji Yuyi unleashed the Vatum wind with the energy of the dark dimension, and Dormammu in the dark dimension shattered another planet. The wind of Vatum turned into a wind blade and hit O2, directly shattering the Krypton armor on O2's body and tearing his steel body. Ji Yuyi took advantage of O2 to protect himself with a biological force field, and activated the shape of Icon to transform more than 20 doppelgangers, and each doppelganger launched a magic that was difficult to break free. Styrax Crimson Chains, and more than 20 Crimson Chains directly bundled O2 into rice dumplings. Ji Yuyi was close in an instant, raised her hand and made her best magic astral projection with a palm, and knocked O2's soul out of the body with one palm. O2, who was beaten out of his body, looked at his body without reacting, and was tied up and fell to the ground. He was trying to rush over, and Furuchi appeared in front of him, and Furuchi flipped his palm and O2 felt that he was shrinking, and then was caught by Furuchi in a round container formed by magic. Ji Yuyi grabbed the ball that imprisoned O2's soul with one hand, waved it gently with the other hand, and then dragged O2's motionless body back to Karma Taj intending to interrogate him properly. After a while, O2 was captured by Koichi and asked some questions before being confined to Karma Taj, and in the past 2 years, O2 has learned Karma Taj's magic, but the source of magic uses the energy in his own body instead of stealing the dimensional demon god. However, after once fighting a dimensional invasion with Koichi, Mephisto of the Hell Dimension set his sights on O2's powerful body and tried to seduce him unsuccessfully. Today O2 changed into a regular clothes and walked down the streets of New York, saw a newspaper on the side of the road, walked in, the headline showed Tony Stark declaring himself Iron Man, and a newspaper next to it said that New Mexico dropped a hammer and no one could lift it. He saw the picture of the hammer and recognized it as Thor's Mjolnir and decided to check it out. Then he flew away directly under the surprised gaze of passers-by, but he looked at the Superman origin comics he was holding in his hand as he flew, and everything that happened to them before Krypton was recorded by these comics, but he guessed that it was the multiverse effect that caused these people to know the past of Krypton. However, there is no record of the Supreme Sun God lore, but there is not the new Krypton General Hor, but the Super Kryptonian Hor, and this guy also likes my God lore's fiancé. In some other comics, Divine Kara fell in love with an inky race that did not conform to the aesthetic of Krypton. O2 decided to find a time to find the editors of these comics, let them delete these messy things, change the only person Carla likes to the Supreme Sun God lore. If they disagree or for some political correctness or something, O2 will see if they choose what so-called political correctness or their own family. By the way, there is also the story of the supreme god Lore and General Hor, who have worked hard to rebuild the new Krypton, and then let all of them write about these two as the protagonists in the future. And he is very unaccustomed to Superman's feelings about his own people, and for the sake of a group of Earth bugs, he actually destroyed the hope of rebuilding Krypton with his own hands. The people of the Al family are all a group of imperial moths. Of course, Waffen L is not counted, she is the staunchest follower of my god Lore. However, the doomsday recorded in these comics can be studied by Waffens, and any product that can strengthen the Empire will be of interest to Waffens. Thinking of this, Lore clicked a few times on his armor, and asked the artificial intelligence of the exploration spaceship to record these superhuman comics in 3 parts, which were sent to the supreme god Lore, General Hor, and Waffen. O2 glanced under the clouds and found that he had reached his destination. He first looked for the location of Mjolnir, saw that it had been surrounded by a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and also saw Saul trying to break in. Thor knocked over several agents who intercepted him and came to where the hammer was, and Hawkeye, who was already aiming a bow and arrow at him on a tower, asked, "Do you want to kill him?" Coulson replied, "Don't, let him try to see if he knows something about this hammer." Thor tried to lift the hammer and found that he couldn't, breaking down and shouting, "No! Father, I already know that I am wrong, do not give up on me." It was raining in the sky, and several agents stepped forward to arrest Thor, who had no sense of resistance, and Coulson stepped forward to hear something when he was trying to get Thor away. Coulson said, "Listen, is there any sound in the sky?" The bald head next to him said, "The head seems to be a sonic boom, it is already close." Everyone looked up and saw that a body flew directly down from the sky. It was O2. Coulson stepped forward and said, "Mr. O2, why are you here?" O2 has also appeared since he last left the bureau, but the director, Nick Fury, and the previous director strictly forbade anyone to approach or investigate him. O2 replied, "I haven't seen Coulson for a long time. I found out that the Prince of Asgard has come to this planet, so come and see." With that, he shifted his gaze to Thor. Thor saw that the person who came was someone he knew and shouted, "O2, O2, it's my Saul from Asgard, your best friend, let them go." O2 said, "I'm not your friend." Still, he motioned for Coulson to let him go. After Thor regained his freedom, he directly ran forward and hugged O2's arms. "O2 my friend, I was banished by my father, I hope you can help me return to Asgard to restore my divine power. Even for Loki's sake, you must help me." O2 pressed Thor's hand holding his arm and said, "You all said that you were banished, I can't send you back to Asgard. This will cause an interstellar conflict between Asgard and the Fettel Empire, and what does the matter between Lore and Varfin have to do with me? Waffen and I are just colleagues, and we don't care about each other's private affairs." At this time, Coulson said, "Everyone, let's go inside and talk, this rain can't stop for the time being." Looking at the heavier and heavier rain, O2 clenched his fist in one hand and punched the sky, and the air was exploded and directly broke the dark clouds in the sky. Then he said, "It won't rain here for more than 10 days now." Everyone watched this scene in shock. O2 turned his head to watch Mjolnir walk over. Thor turned his head unbearably when he saw his movements. He knew that O2 could be lifted but didn't know how. Anyway, his hammer these Kryptonians can lift. O2 shook his hand. He felt a divine force trying to invade his body. Fortunately, he had the genes of the Asa god race on his body. These divine forces were useless to him. He first wrapped Mjolnir with a biological force field and lifted him up and threw him a few times. Thor looked at this scene and felt as uncomfortable as his own woman being sprinkled in front of him. Coulson said, "Mr. O2, this is Mjolnir. And this guy who broke into our base is Thor, the god of thunder from Asgard." O2 threw the hammer down and said, "That's right, that's it." Coulson saw that O2 put the hammer down again and tried to lift it unsuccessfully, and then everyone entered the room, and O2 left here temporarily to see if the spacecraft was recorded. After O2 left, Coulson turned to Saul. "So, how did you get banished as a prince?" Thor said dejectedly, "After the Feast of the Gods, my father was ready to let me inherit the throne. When my brother Loki said that we should take down Jotunheim who provoked us, or beat the king of Jotunheim and make him completely submit to me. So you went to beat a king of the other party for this one reason." Coulson. Duzal said. "Not the other side. Jotunheim is a frozen planet, that is, where it has been heating up recently. Loki and I couldn't beat Lof, the frost giant king of Jotunheim. It wasn't that hard when I fought the Warner King. Laufey was beaten down by me and Loki alone. And finally it was our father, Odin, the king of the gods of Asgard, who forced him back and took us back. Coulson saw that the bald men standing behind Thor had already made a note, and then motioned for Thor to continue. Thor continued. Then father pressed us to ask who came up with the idea. Did you carry it down by yourself and didn't offer your brother out? Coulson asked. Thor said emotionally. How is it possible? Of course I said it, and Loki is the mastermind. Then he was beaten by my father and couldn't get up, and I went up to theorize and stripped me of my divine power and banished me to Midgar. The corners of Coulson's mouth moved and he thought to himself, you guys are really good brothers. After learning what he wanted to know, Coulson and his bald subordinates backed out. When Thor was alone in grief, a voice appeared. I'm sorry for my brother, because of me you were deprived of the right to the throne and divine power. The one who came was none other than Loki. Thor looked up and said, no, it's okay Loki, I didn't blame you. If I were a little stronger, I could defeat the frost giant King Laufey, and you wouldn't have been beaten so badly by your father. The corner of Loki's mouth twitched, pretending to be sad. I'm sorry my brother, my father died angrily after banishing you because of your recklessness. Thor suddenly heard a voice in his head. No, it can't be, the father is Odin, the king of the gods, how is it possible? Then Thor said tremblingly, it's all my fault. If it weren't for my recklessness, my father wouldn't have done this. Loki, you take me back to my father's funeral. Loki shook his head and said, no, Thor, you can't go back. I'm now the god king of Asgard, but my father has banished you, and I can't take you back against my father's last order. So I'm sorry, my brother, I have to go and deal with my father's affairs, your ordinary life in Midgar. After all, this is my father's last order. After saying that, Loki went back, and Thor said dejectedly, my brother, I will miss you, goodbye. Coulson just entered the door and said suspiciously, I just came in, don't rush to say goodbye. Then he added, Thor, your friend, they have found this place and want to take you back. Thor then went back with Jane who had come to the base to find him. Thor is picked up by Jane and the girls, and after learning about what happened to Thor recently, Jane begins to comfort him, and they go to base that night. New Krypton. Lore looked at the comics passed by O2 in his hand and studied. He wanted to see if there was a specific evolutionary route that evolved into Bai Yinchao. However, the above-mentioned staying in the sun for 10,000 years of evolutionary gold seems to be okay, but Lore can't wait that long. Lore has two sun god authorities in this universe, and can use the privileges brought by the authority to directly attract the sun's light. Thinking of this, Lore got up and left the crystal throne. In the 2 years since O2 went to Earth, New Krypton dismantled 5 resource planets to refine Krypton crystals, creating a large crystal palace and 3 crystal battleships in the history of Kryptonian that integrate attack and defense. When Lore got up and went out, he saw Vafen flying towards this side, and Vafen flew to Lore and said, see me God. Luo nodded with a smile and said, Waffen, why are you free to come to me today, is there something important? Now the tile fan has a new body, which is stronger than before. Vaffen held up the cartoon with the avatar of Doom's son printed on his hand and said, my god, the comics transmitted back from O2 have this biological weapon manufacturing method, and the manufacturing method on Krypton was eliminated by the Al family at that time. I want to try the method on the comic to add some ideas from me and Aisha to try to make this biological weapon. Lore looked at Waffen with a serious expression and said, Waffen, you don't know what kind of monster it is, I have seen and fought with it with my own eyes. The most powerful thing about Doomsday is not its terrifying looking size and hideous bone spurs on its hands, but its ability to evolve infinitely and be immortal. If you want to study Doomsday I support you. However, 10 Kryptonian warriors must follow up the whole way, and if anything goes wrong and terminate the project directly, I will now give you the information of Doomsday and some samples. Then Lore opened the permission of Waffen to query Doomsday, and mobilized the power of destruction that had not been used in his body, condensed a small yellow ball of light in his hand and handed it to Waffen. Waffen said in shock, my god. How can you have the power of Doom in you? Lore said, I was contaminated when I fought him. After saying that, at this moment, Lore felt that he now had a brain. He said to Whammy, Waffen, I now order you to use the Doomday sample I gave you, put it into a separate creation room, and cultivate Doomday with me as the genetic mother. Whammy widened her small eyes, her delicate little face was full of shock, and she said, My God Luoer, this is too dangerous, your genes are the masterpiece of the creation room, and they are formed by the best genetic composition. You can't be the mother of your genes, so I propose to inform General Hor to use his genes to create Doomday. Lore thought for a moment and said, Okay, I'll go find Hor now and ask him to cooperate with you. The Day of Doom created with his super Kryptonian genes will be stronger than Hor's own, but let Hor have one more Doomsday child who doesn't know if he will have any opinions. Quote. Children born in the creation chamber can be defined as offspring on Krypton, but if the creation chamber is modified to resemble a cloning capsule, even if two genes are combined in it, they will be considered clones rather than offspring, which is very strange. Lore remembered something and walked towards the Crystal Palace and followed him with a fan. There is a secret room in the depths of the palace, where some precious materials are placed, and Lore intends to make this secret room into a treasure trove of lore and collect all the treasures in this universe, but now many of the things in it are put in by Gila. Lore walked over to a frozen cabinet and opened it, revealing the corpse of a Doomday demon, which had been preserved the last time he had used his spatial abilities in Asgardal. Luo took it out and handed it to Whammy. This is also studied, it contains the demon-like technology of the Doom Sun gene and the heavenly apocalypse star. If we can transform it, we can have an endless demon-like legion. Waffen nodded excitedly, dragging the frozen corpse of the Doomday demon, and Lore also flew towards the military headquarters, and now he was waiting to think about what to say, and Hor agreed to this experiment. Lore came to greet several Imperial soldiers passing by and entered the newly built military fortress. Hor was giving orders to the Imperial soldiers, and Lore stepped forward and said, Hor, do you have any important activities in the military department recently? Turning his head and finding that it was Lore, he said, Recently, one of the population stars we sheltered was killed by half of a Titan's fleet, and we have now sent 5 Imperial warriors to start tracking, but that Purple Titan is too cunning, and runs around the universe with his flagship and affiliated fleets. Lore thought for a moment, killing half of the people, the Purple Titans, should be Thanos. Lore said, Yes, you continue to send more people to track. I heard that this Purple Titan is related to those Eternals who inquire about our information, and send 2 more Imperial warriors to Midgard to assist O2. Howard nodded to indicate that he understood, and then asked, By the way, why are you free to come over today? Lore said, I want to discuss something with you today. Kier was puzzled. What is the matter that requires you to come to me in person? Lore said, It's about the Doomsday experiment. Quote. Oh. When he heard this, he instantly became serious. After all, he had also seen that monster. Although he didn't fight, he had seen his terrifying growth and strength. Seeing that Haor's expression began to be serious, Lore said, I have asked the Varfin to restart this experiment, but this time we are going to create a controllable Doomday, just like the Doomday demon of the Apocalypse Star. Thinking of the monsters that appeared on Asgard, Terra said, Isn't the Apocalypse destroying Day demon strong? It is also easy to be killed by the gods against weaknesses. Lore shook his head and said, Hor, those Doomsday devils are indeed not very strong, and they carry very few Kryptonian genes, but the most important point. They are controllable and can follow orders just like ordinary demons. Hearing Lore's words, Hor felt that he was instantly enlightened, but he had a strange sense of crisis, as if he was being targeted by something bad. Lore continued, All of you were going to use my genes to create Doom for your mother, but Varfin didn't agree to refuse to do so, so the only person with powerful genes on New Krypton is you. Terry reacted instantly, shouting, Wait. So you and Varfin decided to let me be the mother of this gene. Let me be a Kryptonian child who is not male or female. Lore nodded and said, That Hor, gender fans can still be set, that is, maybe this child is not human-like. Quote. Terry thought that he would have one more child before he was married, and he didn't look like a person. If he was known by Lilandra, wouldn't his happiness be lost? But just a minute later, Shock's eyes became firm, and Shocker said to Lore with a serious expression, Yes, just use my genes as the mother, Let the gender be chosen by Wafin herself, it doesn't matter if she directly combines the two genders. For the sake of New Krypton and the Fedir Empire, these sacrifices are acceptable. Lore looked at the shocked face and said, or do we use the genes of the previous Super Kryptonian? The Day of Doom created in this way as your brother. Kier was originally a little moved, but still refused. No need, my genes now contain divine power and various evolutionary abilities. And now my genes are more powerful and mature than Super Kryptonian Hor, so directly using my genes can raise the lower limit of the experimental Doomsday Day. Lore then went to the Academy of Sciences with Hor. Riva and Aisha of the Academy of Sciences are decomposing the Doomsday demon brought from the Lore Treasury. Gila is also here, but she is fiddling with the corpses. In this laboratory, Anvar is studying the control system of the Doomsday demon. Aisha is studying the genetic makeup. After all, their supreme star is also considered the top of the universe in this technological neighborhood. At this time, Lore and Hacker also came to the Academy of Sciences, and as soon as they entered the advanced research room inside, they saw the busy Varfin and Aisha, and Gila who behaved strangely. The people inside heard the airlock door open and turned their heads to see Lore and Hor, and Varfin and Aisha stepped forward and saluted. See my god Lore, General Hor. Lore waved his hand to indicate that he could. When Hor was taken away by Varfin and Ayasara, Lore walked up to Gila, who was fiddling with the corpse, and said, are you planning to create a guard for yourself? Gila raised the severed arm in her hand and said, my authority can make them move and turn them into a unique army of the undead. Using your new Kryptonian technology to build a group of high-tech armor for them, and some anti-aircraft rifle energy swords and the like, it is completely enough to occupy the 9 realms for me after the death of that old man Odin. Lore hugged Gila from behind and said, Your Majesty the future Asgard Gila, you should say that it is for us to occupy the 9 realms. Gila turned around and hugged Lore and said, yes, I was negligent and should have occupied the 9 realms for us. Quote. The Asgard Division. In the hall of the Asgard Immortal Palace, Loki sat alone on the throne representing the position of the God King, and he looked at the golden Asgard Immortal Palace and was very excited. He finally became the God King of Asgard, and the 9 realms will be his own after that. When Loki happily got up and was about to go to the Immortal Palace Square to announce the news of his accession to the throne, his eyes suddenly drifted to the mural above the Immortal Palace Hall. Loki grabbed the Eternal Spear and walked underneath the mural, thinking that at the banquet of the gods a few years ago, when the Kryptonian gods saw the mural, his father was very angry, and he thought that there must be some secret under the mural. Loki used a clairvoyant magic but saw nothing, and there was a disc-shaped thing blocking behind him. Loki glanced at the eternal spear in his hand and thought that he was now the God King of Asgard and qualified to know these secrets. Then Loki swung the eternal spear and fired a ray to smash the mural above, and when the smoke and dust cleared, Loki's pupils shrank sharply. There is also this mural underneath this, but the content on this mural is completely different from the previous one. In this mural, Odin is dressed in armor and riding an 8-legged Pegasus with an eternal spear, followed by a black-armored woman with Mjolnir. The introduction to the event next to it says Ola Odinson, daughter of Odin, goddess of death. Loki felt very unbelievable. He had heard that Asgard's events about peace maintenance were fake since he was a child. And Hela, known as the goddess of death, had not even heard any news. Loki took back his thoughts and continued to look behind the mural. He saw that on the previous fresco, Odin, who shook hands and drank with Laufey, the king of Jotunheim, stepped directly on Laufey's head in this mural, holding Sult's head in his hand, and the goddess of death next to him was a god that Loki did not know, as if it was a Warner god. However, the final situation of the mural completely changed. The Mjolnir in Hela's hand and the giant wolf under him disappeared. And the Valkyrie army was slaughtered, and Odin watched all this indifferently and finally locked Hela into the underworld of Heim. Loki finally accepted this sealed history, and then remembered what Varfin said about seeing many corpses buried in battle armor in the treasure house, and he got up and rushed towards Odin's treasure house. After coming to the location that Wasi said last time, the command destroyer opened here, and Loki jumped down when he saw that it was really empty below. After finding that it was dark around, Loki used a light spell, and the surroundings instantly brightened. Loki saw that he was surrounded by a group of Asgardian undead in armor, and the corpse of a giant wolf on the stone steps at the front. But at this moment, Loki became excited. Aren't these now the army specially prepared for him? Loki re-enters the treasury and takes the eternal flame of Surtl. Loki first arranged a magic array to control the undead, firmly holding the control in his own hands and directly binding it to himself. When everything was ready, Loki raised the eternal flame in his hand and shouted, "Wake up! My army of the undead, conquer the 9 realms for the great god King Loki." But after shouting, Loki felt a little strange, as if someone had been staring at him and made him feel a sense of shame. Loki looked around holding the eternal flame, and there was not a single one around except the destroyer Warframe. At this time, the god King Odin, who fell into Odin's long sleep, passed, and the eyes of the destroyer watched Loki's actions and the corners of his mouth twitched unconsciously. He felt that he had failed as a father. The eldest daughter was raised crookedly by himself, the second son grew crooked because of his own indulgence, and the third son had psychological problems because he always wanted to get his attention. God King Odin decided to leave it alone. Anyway, it had come to this point. If something happened, he would forcibly break his long sleep and wake up. After repeatedly confirming that his actions had not been discovered by anyone, Loki slammed the eternal flame he was holding into the middle of the magic array on the ground, and the eternal flame instantly turned green and spread towards the surrounding corpses. The corpses covered in green eternal flame began to move, and Loki laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha, my army is now coming to meet your god king." Then, Loki began to control these undead soldiers through the magic array, but a scene that Loki did not expect appeared. These undead soldiers had no intention of stopping at all under Loki's order, and some even pulled out the long swords they carried on their battle armor. Loki began to panic. He continued to pump energy into the magic array and shouted, "Stop it, you fools, I'm Loki, the God King, and it's your master." However, these undead warriors did not obey Loki's orders at all, and were still closing in on Loki. Loki's hand flipped and a green light flashed and a dagger appeared, and he stabbed the dagger into an undead warrior who leaned over, but the undead warrior was not affected in the slightest and raised the longsword in his hand. Loki rolled over to avoid this attack, and immediately got up and ran to the side of the destroyer armor, commanding with the eternal spear, "Quick! Get me out of here!" The head of the destroyer Warframe opened a firing line and crushed the surrounding undead warriors, and Loki saw that the broken undead warriors on this side were actually reorganizing. The destroyer Warframe's movements suddenly became smooth. It was controlled remotely by Odin. The destroyer Warframe grabbed Loki and jumped towards the gap above, and after going out, he fired another launch line to dissolve and bury the gap, and then the destroyer's movements became dull again. Loki looked at the blocked gap in horror. And at this moment a huge wolf howl came out from below, and Hela's mount, the giant wolf griffin, woke up. Odin continued to watch all this, and he wondered what Loki would do about it. Loki said to himself, "No. How so? My magic array should be able to control this group of undead. I am the most powerful mage in the 9 realms, my magic cannot be wrong." Then Loki suddenly thought of something and said excitedly, "Yes, I am a magician and my mother is the most powerful witch in Warnerheim, so my mother must have a way to control this group of undead warriors." Loki thought that his mother was a witch of Warnerheim, so there must be a way to control these undead. At this moment, the blocked hole seemed to be being violently hit, and Loki did not dare to slack off when he saw this scene. After ordering the destroyer to stay here with the eternal spear, he immediately ran towards the palace of his mother, Frigga, the Queen of Heaven. Odin, who saw the end from the beginning, said that his children were not saved, but he did not expect that Loki, who had been doing things very steadily, was not to make up for it after causing trouble, but to find his mother for help as soon as possible. New Krypton. Hela, who was sleeping on Lor's chest, suddenly woke up, and Lor saw this abnormal situation and hugged Hela and asked, "Is something wrong? You will sleep for a long time if you don't finish it, and this time you will wake up in a short time." Hela twisted her graceful body to adjust the position of the yellow dragon inside the Jade Gate, and then continued to lie on Lor's chest and said, "I feel that my group of undead and imprisoned by Odin's old immortal army has been awakened and tried to wrest control from me." Lor was about to adjust his position, but Hela held him down. Hela's expression was a little subtle. "Don't move, it hurts." After Hela got used to it a little, Lor said, "I think it should be your brother named Loki." O2 reported that Thor was exiled by Odin, Asgard is now under Loki's management. The last time at the banquet of the gods he tried to see the content under the frescoes of the fairy palace, but was blocked by Odin, so after taking control of Asgard this time, he must have explored these pasts. Hela's fingers circled on Lor's chest. I can now control my army of the undead remotely, but only with a few simple orders. Lor put his hands on the two large grapefruit above Hela's jade legs and gently kneaded. Oh. So what order did you give? Kill Odin. Hela reached behind and knocked off Lor's hand on the big grapefruit. It's rare that they were awakened. I can't make good use of it to add a little blockage to Asgard. How can they let them kill Odin and finally waste it? My command to them is to destroy everything in sight. Lor said, since you have all arranged, let's sleep for a while. Saying that her hand rested on two large grapefruit again, Hela ignored it this time and continued to sleep. Asgard. Loki hurriedly ran to Frigga's palace, and without having time to pay attention to the maids at the door, Loki broke in directly. Frigga already knew why Loki came to him, so she was not surprised at all that he broke in directly, and Frigga saw Odin who fell into a long sleep in order to stop the growth of his divine power. As the Queen of Asgard and the Witch of Warnerheim, Frigga has the most powerful magical knowledge of the 9 realms, and she can talk directly to the sleeping Odin in consciousness space, so she knows everything that happens. After Loki came in, he saw Frigga who was guarding Odin's side, looking at his mother Loki, who was already a little haggard, and didn't know how to speak for a while. Frigga turned to look at him and said, my child, are you here to visit your father? Hearing this, Loki shifted his gaze to Odin and said, yes, mother, I came to see how my father is doing. After all, now that Thor is also exiled, Asgard can only rely on me. Then Loki said, then mother, I will go first, there are still some things to deal with over there in the immortal palace, so I won't bother. Seeing this scene, Loki was no longer going to tell his mother what had happened. He thought of Thor, so he planned to lead the undead warriors to Midgard. Loki turned and ran out of the palace towards Odin's treasury. He could feel that when he used control magic, he could draw the attention of the undead warriors underground to himself. Loki sends a message to Heimdall, who is stationed at the Rainbow Bridge, on the way, telling him to prepare the teleportation of the Rainbow Bridge in advance. Heimdall had just teleported the 3 warriors of the Asnarok and Thor's fiancé to Midgard when he received a message from Loki. Then he used his eyes that could see through the 9 realms to look at Loki to see what he was doing. Loki came to Odin's treasury and saw the destroyer armor still guarding the entrance of the cave and ordered with the eternal spear. Destroyer quickly opened the cave entrance and released the group of undead. Then Loki himself prepared the control magic in advance. The destroyer armor followed the order to open the hole, and the undead warriors below rushed out when they found the light, and Loki watched these undead warriors activate the control magic, which instantly attracted them. At this moment, a wolf roar came, and a black shadow smashed the narrow hole and rushed out. It was Hela's mount, the giant wolf griffin. Loki was startled, then did not dare to slacken, and ran towards the Rainbow Bridge, followed by the giant wolf griffin and a large group of undead warriors. On the way, they also encountered the Immortal Palace guards, and as they prepared to go up to meet the enemy, Loki shouted, don't come. Hurry up and clear the road to the Rainbow Bridge. Seeing these fairy palace guards immediately went to execute, and the undead warriors behind Loki did not attack them because they were attracted by Loki's magic, and kept chasing Loki. The giant wolf griffin jumped in front of Loki, and when the giant mouth opened and was about to bite him, Loki saw that a sliding shovel slipped under Griffin's abdomen, and several phantoms were divided in an attempt to confuse the giant wolf griffin. But because Loki had the aura of controlling magic on him, these illusions he separated did not have any effect at all. When he ran to the Rainbow Bridge, Loki shouted, Heimdall, open the Rainbow Bridge to Midgard. Quote. Heimdall recognized these undead warriors as they ran out of Odin's treasury. These were none other than the troops of Hela, the former crown princess goddess of death. Heimdall thought that Thor was in Midgard, and Loki planned to use these undead warriors to kill Thor directly. However, he still inserted the sword in his hand, and the console of the Rainbow Bridge activated it, because Loki held the eternal spear representing the power of the God King, and Heimdall swore allegiance to the God King of Asgard. Loki condensed the control magic into his hand, came to the passage and threw it directly. Loki entered a little of Thor's breath on it, This breath will attach to Thor with control magic, and then hid with Heimdall. The undead warrior and the giant wolf griffin behind him noticed that the aura of magic was moving rapidly, so he chased out along the rainbow bridge without hesitation, and after the last undead warrior also chased over, Heimdall closed the passage. Then Heimdall turned to Loki and said solemnly, "You shouldn't touch this army and this history." Loki finally relaxed, but was reprimanded by Heimdall and yelled, "Shut up. Now I am the God King of Asgard. All of you have to listen to me." Loki then returned to Odin's treasury to put the eternal flame back in its original position, but at this moment the shadow of Thor appeared in his mind, and he recalled the bits and pieces with Thor as a child, and a sense of guilt appeared. Loki finally made up his mind and shook his head. "Even if Thor is still alive, I can become the God King of Asgard. I am first an evil god and then a god of tricks. I have to go and save him." Then Loki's gaze was on the frost giant's ice treasure box, and he felt that this treasure seemed to be the most suitable thing for him. At this time, the corners of Frigga's mouth in the palace rose slightly, and everything that appeared in Loki's mind just now was made by her. Loki put his hand on top of the ice treasure box, and then he was horrified to find that his arm turned ice blue. Loki knows exactly what this scene represents. It's exactly the skin of their mortal enemy, the frost giant. At this moment, Loki was a little broken. No wonder Odin has always had a feeling of ignoring him. It turns out that he is a frost giant. And since he was a child, Odin has always told them that they will become kings in the future, but he did not expect that Odin said to himself the king of Jotunheim, not the king of Asgard. At this moment, Loki struggled, but finally made up his mind to pick up the ice treasure box and walk towards the rainbow bridge. He wanted to prove his ability by saving Thor. However, he did not give up the idea of becoming the God King of Asgard, and when he saved Soren, he stayed in Midgard forever as a mortal, and blew up Jotunheim through the Rainbow Bridge, and ascended to the position of the God King of Asgard by virtue of his battle merits. After all, Odin became the king of the gods by force. Midgard Earth. Thor happily took Jane with him and chatted with his 4 companions who had come from Asgard. At this time, Sif noticed that Thor's eyes were fascinated by this mortal in front of him, and said angrily, "Saul, you and this mortal will not have results. You must go back with us now, and His Majesty Odin will forgive you." Thor shook his head and grabbed Jane's hand. "No way, Sif, I'm already in love with Jane, and I'm immortal now. It's impossible to return to Asgard, and I can't even attend my father's funeral." Speaking of this, Thor choked up a little. However, at this time, Vandal, one of the 3 warriors of the Immortal Palace, spoke. "What funeral? Your Majesty is just sleeping in Odin now, and Asgard is messed up by Loki, so we came to pick you up." Hearing this, Thor instantly wiped away his tears and said, "My father is not dead yet." At this moment, a loud noise came, and everyone saw that it was the Rainbow Bridge. Griffin. Whoosh. A wolf roar came from the Rainbow Bridge, and Thor and the others followed the prestige to see many figures appear in the Rainbow Bridge. When the light of the Rainbow Bridge appeared in front of everyone's eyes, it was the army of the undead and the giant wolf griffin that Loki had brought from Asgard. At this moment, the control magic sent out by Loki was attached to Thor. Before everyone could react, the green light on Thor's body disappeared, and the undead warriors who suddenly stood still instantly shifted their gaze to Thor. Sif sensed something was wrong and shouted at Thor, "Thor, let's go. These undead should be Loki knowing that we are coming for you, so he sent them to hunt you down." Saying that, she and the 3 warriors of the Immortal Palace pulled out their weapons and entered the battle state. After feeling the magical aura on Thor's body, the undead warriors moved and swung their swords to kill, and Thor immediately grabbed Jane's hand and ran back. Coulson, who sensed the energy fluctuations in the distance, arrived with the agents, and Thor and Jane ran in the direction of Coulson and the others. When they came, Coulson spoke, "Oh my god, these monsters of Thor are also from your Asgard." Thor gasped, "It should be, they're wearing old-fashioned Asgard's armor," and Loki played with their souls. In the distance, Sif and the 3 warriors of the Immortal Palace have already faced the Undead Legion. Sif cut off the head of the undead warrior in front of him with a sword, but the body of this undead warrior is still attacking. When Vostag was knocked down, his fat body smashed on the head that Sif had cut off. Vostag directly crushed the undead head by his own weight, and the green light in the undead warrior's eye sockets dissipated, and his body fell to the ground. The sharp-eyed Hogan saw this scene and immediately shouted, "Everyone! Hit the heads of these undead so they die." In the distance, Coulson and his agents also arrived, and immediately took out their pistols and shot, but it was completely useless except to harass these undead warriors, and the bullets of the pistol could not move these undead warriors at all. At this time, the giant wolf griffin couldn't sit still, and he felt that the target with a magical aura was quickly moving away from here. Griffin jumped into the middle of the battlefield and bit Vandal, and Griffin's sharp teeth pierced Vandal's body. Vostag was extremely sad to see this scene. He was the eldest of the 3 warriors of the Immortal Palace. He had been teaching them fighting techniques as a teacher to everyone, and he had a very deep affection for everyone. Vostag yelled, "Ah! You beast, let go of your mouth. Vandal insisted that I came to save you." Saying that, he waved the weapon in his hand and hit Griffin's nose. Griffin was hit on the nose and released his mouth in pain. Vostag caught Vandal and shouted to everyone, "Retreat quickly, we can't deal with them, find a place to treat them first." Sif and Hogan also immediately retreated, and they stopped the undead warrior and opened several openings in their bodies. Griffin watched as the fleeing crowd was about to chase after it when Coulson shot it in the eye. Griffin cried out in pain, whoosh. Although Coulson's bullet did not blind Griffin's eye, Griffin was temporarily unable to open one eye because of the pain. Griffin turned his head to stare at Coulson viciously. "I seem to have completely angered it." Coulson looked into Griffin's eyes. Griffin rushed towards Coulson with a dash. "Everyone hurry up and hide." With that, Coulson and his bald men hid in the housing area. Griffin rushed over and slapped a paw on the car they had just leaned on. Boom. The car exploded in an instant when it was slapped flat by a paw. Coulson and his men attacked the undead warriors who surrounded them while running towards the position of Thor and the others. Thor became immortal because he was seized by Odin, and could only watch all this helplessly. But in fact, Odin only sealed Thor's strength, and the divine power has never been deprived of in his body. Sif shouted, "Thor, run quickly, as long as you are alive, you can avenge us." Thor looked at Vandal, who was already seriously injured next to him, and Coulson and the others who were shooting desperately. Thor didn't want to let others fight for him like this. Looking at Griffin, the giant wolf rushing over, Thor directly stepped forward to stop it. Griffin, however, was a little strangely alert, and it stopped to see if Thor would pose a threat to it. Thor spread his arms and shouted, "Loki! My brother, I beg you to stop. I am willing to give up the throne completely and never regret Asgard. So Loki, stop." At this time, Griffin had determined that the target was not a threat. Father. Another rainbow bridge of light appeared. Loki grabbed the frost treasure box and appeared, saw Thor standing in front of Griffin and shouted, "Don't. Saul, get out of there." Thor looked back and saw a huge claw appear in front of his eyes. When Thor came back to his senses, Griffin, the huge wolf claw, slapped straight on him. Thor flew out upside down, his bones shattered, crashing into a house behind him, and there was no movement. Loki broke down and shouted, "No. Saul." Although Loki has always wanted to kill Thor, he still can't stand the collapse after seeing Thor's death in front of him. Looking at the undead warrior Loki who surrounded him, he was filled with anger. "You are all going to die today. I will make your souls unable to even enter the underworld of Heim." Loki shouted angrily. Saying that, Loki raised the frost treasure box in his hand, and a terrifying cold current swept the audience. Loki desperately sent magic power to the frost treasure box. The frost treasure box emitted an ice blue light, and the surroundings were instantly frozen, and the undead warriors who surrounded them were directly frozen into ice sculptures, and the soul fire in the heads of the undead warriors was directly extinguished. The power of the frost box completely affected here, and a snowstorm fell in the sky of New Mexico, and the surrounding temperature dropped instantly, and the ground was already covered with ice. With the frost box, Loki completely changed the climate of New Mexico. After all, this can agree on the supreme treasure of Heim, which can completely freeze the supreme treasure of a planet. But Loki can only do this now. His current magic can't support him freezing an entire planet, if the old Loki can freeze a planet. Griffin saw the solved undead warriors and felt that the magic in Loki's body had dried up, so he rushed straight towards Loki. Loki threw away the frost treasure box in his hand, which was a burden for himself who no longer had magic powers. Loki flipped his hands and two daggers made of uru metal appeared, and just when Griffin was about to bite Loki, a blue laser shot towards its hip, and this blue laser directly hit the two bells hanging down by Griffin. Griffin instantly felt that his wolf life was not worth it, and he could only roll around in pain and temporarily lost his mobility. A red figure in the sky fell to the ground in a commotion pose, and came to a standard superhero landing. This figure is none other than Iron Man Tony Stark. Tony wears the latest Mark 6 in the Mark series, made with new elements. Tony got up and made a pose and said, "Hello Bambi, I'm not late, am I?" Loki slowed down and said, "Although I don't know where you came from as an Iron Man, you are still the only person who annoys me as soon as we meet." Then Loki found that the sky had begun to shift, the sky was covered with thunder and lightning, and the weather instantly turned into rain and snow. A voice came from Coulson's headset, "Chief Coulson, the hammer in the temporary base has flown away and is flying quickly in your direction." Then Coulson said, "Everyone, look at a hammer in the sky." Everyone looked up to the sky, and Mjolnir the hammer came here, hovered on it for a while, and then rushed straight towards Thor's covered house. In the ruins of the house, a hand reached out and grabbed Mjolnir. The violent thunder and lightning above the sky fell, and the ruins of the house that split the house appeared in front of everyone wearing battle armor. Thor's self-sacrificing behavior for the sake of his companions was recognized by Mjolnir, the hammer of Mjolnir, and also passed the trials under Odin, the king of the gods. His girlfriend Jane Ford saw that Thor was wearing battle armor and covered in thunder was completely inextricable, and now Thor really looks like a thunder god, not a hammer god. Thor said to Loki and Tony, "Get out of the way and let me fix this beast." Tony looked at the energy index displayed on the mask armor and said, "Hell, where did this frightening point male protagonist come from?" Saying that, the jetter on the foot opened, grabbed Loki, who had completely lost his strength, and came to the sky. Thor saw that only the giant wolf griffin was left below him, and then he raised Mjolnir, and the sky was covered with thunder, and then these thunders converged on the hammer, and thunder and lightning erupted all over Thor's body. Griffin had just gotten up when he saw Thor carrying thunder and his master's previous weapon and smashing a hammer on its head. The furious thunder shifted to Griffin and blew it to pieces. But Thor didn't notice when he just flew into the sky, and there was another person who had been watching all this. That person was O2, and then he teleported a record of the whole thing on Midgar to New Krypton. New Krypton Neller sat on the crystal throne watching the messages sent back by O2, and he didn't expect Tony Stark to appear on the scene. Lor got up and left the Crystal Palace, ready to go to the military headquarters himself to meet Hor and send him to Midgar. Along the way, Lor looked at the new Krypton that had been completely on track, and his heart was filled with a sense of disgust from his bones. It seemed that such a Krypton was completely unworthy of himself, and he should not need to consider the problem of population to directly accelerate population synthesis, creating an entire galaxy of Kryptonians to serve themselves. Let these synthetic Kryptonian people and low-level cosmic people fear. Believe in yourself and allow yourself to have complete dominion over everything for them. Suddenly, Lor stopped flying, and he stopped in midair. Lor said to himself with a terrified expression on his face, how can I have such thoughts? Suddenly, Lor seemed to have thought of something, and he used his ability to look at the treasure of life located at his skull. Lor concentrated the abilities of his whole body at the star of the type, and then used his full strength to impact the treasure of life. This time Lor saw it clearly. In the skull-like life treasure book sits a figure. The figure slowly opened its eyes full of golden light, and the figure was wearing a set of battle armor, but that style seemed to be older than that of the expedition 30,000 years ago. The ancient Kryptonian runes on the treasure book of life flowed faster and faster, and finally condensed at the position of the temple. Flesh and blood began to grow on the skull and became the appearance of Lor. You are not me, you are Rao, the god of Krypton. Lor's face became frightened, his expression began to become a little distorted, and Lor found that his body began to get out of control. Rao in Lor's consciousness laughed loudly, but this laughter was a torture for Lor, like forcibly stuffing a high-decibel stereo into the brain of an ordinary person. Lor's body fell directly from the sky uncontrollably, and a bang came directly into a deep pit. It's useless, this body of yours is specially prepared for my rebirth. With a terrifying smile on his face, Rao continued, in order to get rid of the fate of disappearing, I sacrificed the entire multiverse Krypton in order to pull over and inject into this body the soul of you, the supreme little superhuman plane, who has the power to travel through the heavens and realms. Lore raised his head with difficulty, tried to control his body and said, ha ha ha, I didn't expect that I still have this special ability, I already had some doubts when I crossed into the Marvel Universe. Lore continued with a fierce face, when I captured the godhead of the Egyptian sun god Ra, I felt a godhead similar to myself in myself, and I almost thought that it was also my power, but after I felt it carefully, I found that the source of this godhead actually came from the treasure book of life. After I found out that I didn't have the power to drive it away, I stored all my growing power into my body, and left a message for Kier in advance, so that he could lead New Krypton to conquer the entire universe. How do I do it is to take you with me to turn into the nutrients of New Krypton. Saying that, the stars in Lore's body began to stir. Feeling the surging power in Lore's body, the Krypton god Rao began to panic, and Rao shouted in horror, no. You otherworldly. So that you yourself will die. Lore soared into the sky and flew to the middle of the two stars, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Ha ha ha, Rao and I watch all this together. I will not let you, an evil god who does not care about the life and death of his people, continue to be a disaster for New Krypton. Nope. Lore, I hate you. Finally. With a loud bang, Lore incorporated everything he had into the stars in his body, and then Krypton's supreme sun god Lore and the old god Rao disappeared, replaced by a new Krypton with 3 golden stars. End of the book. Thanks for watching.